Is it time to dismantle some doctrines? If you don't know what that means, then come along with me. I'm Dr. Clint Haycock, a former evangelical Bible college teacher and pastor of more than 20 years. Join me as we deconstruct whatever dogmas and beliefs have held you behind, and together work to reconstruct and rebuild your authentic self. I'm very happy to welcome Morgan Piercy to the show. So welcome, Morgan, to the Dismantling Doctrine podcast.
Thanks, Clint. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, we were just saying before we hit record, it's taken ages to get this together. I don't know when. You emailed me months ago, but it was really good. We finally got this together. I'm glad we finally got this chance to meet.
Yes, me too. Me too. This is going to be good.
Yeah, so let me get this straight. So you're a licensed professional counselor. Is that right? You do, basically, your kind of key work is with religious trauma syndrome, although you sound like you do a lot of other things as well.
Yeah, so I'm an LPC in Kansas. So I provide individual therapy mainly for adults that are just deconstructing evangelicalism and Christian nationalism and all that kind of stuff. And then I do have a lot of focus in my practice of deconstructing through a neurodiversity affirming lens. I think that can really change folks' religious trauma experiences when you add that layer on top of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm coming to you. I'm a person who suffers from religious trauma syndrome. This is something I, came across. Obviously, Dr. Marlene Winnell, I've had her on the show a few years ago talking about RTS. Unfortunately, I don't think she does a lot now. She's semi-retired, I think. But I met her through a friend of mine, Janice Selby. I think it was 2022. We did the conference on religious trauma, and I was one of the speakers there. So I've done a lot of research on RTS. Then I realized, I've got loads of RTS from growing up fundamentalists. So
yes,
we definitely have a lot to talk about.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Janice Selby is also a great and just such a great resource. She's so sweet. And I recorded for her show somewhat recently. But yeah, I'm like a Kansas version of her, or at least trying to be. No, I'm not quite there yet. I'm a little bit newer as a therapist, but I just knew that this was going to be my niche and going to be my purpose. There's such a need for it. And it's so taboo. People don't talk about it, but a lot of us are going through it, especially right now.
It's true. And I've found a lot of actual secular therapists don't know what RTS is. They've never heard of it, because I did some counseling a few years ago. I was having some issues at work, some stress issues and things like that. And I was talking to the woman who was assigned my case. And basically I started talking about religious trauma syndrome, and she'd never heard of it. She knew what trauma was, obviously, but RTS, no. So I basically had to educate her, which I think is pretty common, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say so. I think a lot of people feel like, oh, I'm the only person that's feeling this way. The term that I hear said a lot by folks who but maybe don't know the most, or they're just starting to get into it, is church hurt. And I think that phrase kind of irks me just a little bit. And this is just a personal pet peeve of mine. No offense to anybody who uses it, but I think it's deeper than that. Church hurt, a lot of times I see it used in those circles, right? In the circles of people who want to keep people staying within the church. This idea of, oh, it's okay to deconstruct, just do so in your Bible study with your pastor, whatever. And I really like to serve that population that is ready to deconstruct outside of religious authority, somebody who's ready to deconstruct outside of what the right thing to do is, right? In quotation marks. And so church hurt, I think, still kind of downplays the issue, and that's
be a good starting point. Yeah, but a lot of us have been hurt, certainly by the church, but that's like a massive onion. You're peeling back the layers. You talk about spiritual abuse and sexual abuse and on and on. Once you start diving into that and really digging deep into it, man, there's so much stuff that happens in churches. It's absolutely shocking. And as we know, the often patriarchal culture of the leadership structure is rife for abuse. It just lends itself to abuses of all sorts, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, 100%. And I think that's a big one that I see also happening in the deconstruction community. If you have been taught that this structure of a relationship is normal, okay, what happens when you leave your childhood church and now you go off to college and now you're trying to date or get married to somebody, and what you think is normal, what you think is love, what if that's really control and coercion? And so now this thing that feels like love, it's really just familiar, and that's why it feels like love.
I want to hear your story, but maybe for the listeners, if they don't know what we're talking about, what is religious trauma syndrome? Can you give us a better definition than just church hurt, as you say? It's certainly broader
Yeah,
than that, isn't it?
of course. So I would define it as a subtype of complex trauma. I think what makes religious trauma syndrome in particular really fascinating from a clinical perspective is how many of the threats were invisible, right? So I think about if somebody were to get up on stage once a week, I think Dr. Daryl Ray has given this metaphor before, so I want to give him credit for that. If somebody gets on stage once a week and tells you, hey, there's a tiger lurking around town, it could be around any corner, just be on the lookout, it could get you, it could kill you. Yeah, you'd be walking around town really terrified. But with religious trauma syndrome, the tiger is invisible. We have no idea where the tiger is. A lot of people describe coming out of evangelicalism as feeling like there was always a trap door underneath you that could open at any time and you could go to hell, right? You could get hit by a car and wake up in hell. You could just
Yeah.
randomly.
Anything.
So, on top of the death phobia, I think the death phobia is a huge component of religious trauma syndrome, but that's a different point. I think beyond the death phobia, religious trauma syndrome is really complex trauma and interpersonal trauma at the hands of a trusted leader or a trusted some form of spiritual leadership, some form of spiritual accountability, whatever. And so that interpersonal nature of it as well is not really something we can get away from when we're defining RTS. It was the people that you were supposed to be able to trust the most and rely on the most that ended up inadvertently or on purpose stabbing you in the back.
Exactly. And we hear these stories of sexual abuse survivors that come out of a religious context. The Catholic Church, for example, priests who molest boys or girls. I talked to a survivor. She was a student at Doug Wilson's Logos School up in Moscow, Idaho. I've been doing a lot of stuff on Doug Wilson lately with the Sons of Patriarchy, and so, yeah, there's the sexual abuse component, the grooming piece, which is horrific in and of itself. But then added to that was the spiritual grooming. I am a man of God. I've been put in this position to shepherd and watch over you. And don't you dare say anything about this because it will ruin my reputation as the man of God. I am a holy man. So there was all this layering of the spiritual piece on top of the trauma of being groomed and sexually abused. That's got to be absolutely horrific for sure.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. And I think there's not a lot of resources out there for helping men who have gone through a lot of that spiritual abuse because, yeah, with the patriarchy, okay, the patriarchy screws us all over, but it screws men over in a different way, right? I think about purity culture resources, like purity culture recovery resources.
Yeah.
There are a ton of resources out there for women. There's hardly anything for men. And so what I see a lot in my practice is men with OCD that are so afraid of not living up to these leadership expectations. They feel like if they're attracted to a woman, then they've already lusted in their heart, all of these things. And I think it's important for us to remember that really nobody comes out a winner with the patriarchy. Like it's just a different form of spiritual abuse. So yes, there's that power dynamic, and I don't want to downplay that power dynamic that women have to deal with more than men, but really it's not a win for men either at all.
Not many people are winning. The people at the top might think they're winning at the Doug Wilsons of the world, but we hear a story, and this is something, of course, there's people who've never heard of the Sons of Patriarchy podcast. They're trying to blow the whistle on specifically the abuses that go on within these types of churches. And a lot of times, unfortunately, it's women. You hear horrific stories of marital rape. They're not giving permission to their husband. You're going to have sex with me anytime I feel like it, whether or not you're the submissive wife. But it's such a patriarchal culture. They think they have to go along with it. And then these stories, then not reported to authorities. And then the woman is shamed and blamed from the front. It happened with John MacArthur's church. It just happens all the time.
Yeah. And it's so weird that we live in, I know you're not in the US, but those of us that are in the US live in a nation that really is built to protect that kind of thing. It wasn't up until recently that in the state of Missouri, women are now allowed to get a divorce if they're pregnant. That was like 2 months ago.
Very
here.
recent thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Wild. And of course, with Christian nationalism, there comes all of this theocracy stuff baked into our culture, baked into our laws, baked into our politics. And I really feel like there are a lot of people that have some sort of purity culture trauma, religious trauma, just some sort of internalized crap from white colonialism, even if you didn't grow up in the type of family where you go to church every Sunday and you go to the Wednesday night and blah, 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 blah. It's just so prevalent in our culture as a whole now.
It is. Yeah, and I talk about this in my book. When I was a kid, I was 5 years old when I went to vacation Bible school for the first time. It was during the summer, of course. It was actually at someone's house. I grew up in the Seattle area in Washington State. And the Friday night came and the guy got real serious, or the Friday afternoon session, and it was all about now the fear of going to hell. And here's a
Yeah.
room full of kids, some of which are 5, 6, 7 years old. The first time I'd really been confronted with the possibility that if I died, like you said, the tiger got me at the trap door,
Yeah.
I would die and go to hell and suffer for eternity in the flames of hell. That tormented me 4 years. And then I added rapture anxiety on top of that and everything else. So this is just baked in, I think, certainly within evangelicalism. Is that what you come across a lot? People who are afraid of hell and rapture and all the other kind of things that they're traumatized with?
100%. And it doesn't matter if you don't believe in it anymore. I think that's the
Mm,
biggest one. We can deconstruct the doctrine of hell all day long, and you can read all the resources and you can read about the Gehenna trash pit theory and whatever it is. But when your nervous system has been taught to react to that from a very young age, now we have a somatic nervous system body problem. A problem that, again, was created when there was no physical evidence of a threat. And so now, fast forward to today, there's still no physical evidence of a threat, but there wasn't back then. So that doesn't really make you feel any better. So yeah, the doctrine of hell is a huge one, and that just reaches out and latches onto the OCD tendencies. And so I see that happen a lot because with OCD, there's this theme of, am I a good person? There's that constant questioning. Am I a good person? Did I accidentally run over a dog? Did I accidentally steal something from the grocery store? It's just all of these intrusive thoughts. Evangelical theology really thrives on people having that kind of constant guilt. And so those just go hand in hand. I love that you also brought up the rapture theology as well, because that's a big one of just not feeling safe. And then on top of that, I see a lot of people have memories of, as a kid, feeling guilty for not wanting Jesus to come back, feeling guilty for
mm.
wanting to graduate high school, feeling guilty for wanting to get married, feeling guilty for wanting to have all of these experiences, because our huge happily ever after is when Jesus comes back, and we want that to happen as soon as possible. And there's always signs that it's happening right now. We're
Oh
always
yeah,
living in the
we're in
end
the end.
times. We're always,
Yeah,
yeah. And people have a lot of really deep childhood memories of feeling that guilt for feeling that FOMO. So there's those layers, and really wanting to live more of a life here on Earth. And that's really sad.
it's
Like
so true.
that's something that's very natural to want to
Yeah.
continue to live,
You
you
want to
know?
live your life. I don't want Jesus to come back tomorrow or tonight. I want to
Yeah.
have kids. I want to travel. I want to see the world. I want to whatever, go to
Yeah.
university or have these
Yeah.
experiences. And it's so baked in. It's certainly American culture, this Christian hegemony. Because I can remember when I was a pastor in Portland in the States, before I moved to the UK, the first Gulf War, where people were coming by the church, complete random strangers off the street,
Mm-hmm.
coming into my office asking me, is this the end of the world? Is this Armageddon? Is this
Oh,
complete strangers? Like, okay, I better find a church and ask somebody who knows something about theology and the Bible. And complete
yeah.
strange, not Christians. These were non-believers that were just freaking out about, is this
Mm-hmm.
the end of the world? And even now with this Iran war, this is another thing. Every time there's a war in the Middle East involving Israel or any country over there, it's instantly, this is the end times. This has got to be it. This is signs of the end. So it's just baked into our culture, I think.
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Oh, it's hard. And there's just so many platforms that really benefit from that. And oh, that's a whole other rabbit hole
Yeah.
I could go down.
Christian
Yeah.
Zionism, yeah. Well, let's
Yeah.
get into your story because you've obviously come to this. You must have been raised evangelical. Were you a sufferer of RTS yourself?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. I think I tried to make the progressive Christian thing work for so long. So,
Yep.
I'm gonna just back up to the beginning. When I was about in third grade, I had some close family members come to the belief that Barack Obama was the Antichrist.
Okay.
And That's a weird
Yeah,
one. That's
as
kind
you
of a
do.
weird one to hear at family Thanksgiving. That and so I think my concern as a kid already at that point, I think I was old enough to realize, okay, that's probably not true. He's just pro gay marriage. He just
Yeah,
wants
he's
these people to be able to
progressive.
buy property together and adopt a kid. Not a big deal. But I think the concern for me was these adults that I love, that I trust, that are in charge of my well-being have this delusional belief. It doesn't make me love them any less, but it makes me feel a little bit
Hmm.
hyper vigilant and unstable a little bit. And that really broke that whole idea of, okay, mom and dad, grandma and grandpa are perfect. And so around that time, because of it was the end of the world was here.
Clearly.
I got pulled out of public school and put into private school. And the first one was like this kind of charismatic, Pentecostal kind of vibe. I grew up in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and so Oral Roberts University had a huge influence, like that
Oh yeah.
prosperity gospel kind of stuff. Yeah, that really influenced just the whole culture. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff of just again, the world is ending, and I think Jesus was supposed to come back. There was maybe 3 specific times that he was supposed to come
Oh
back
yeah.
and never did. And so I kind of came to the conclusion maybe he's just not that into us. I don't know.
What's
No, like
wrong?
we got to move on with our lives. We got to find somebody, find a spiritual leader that reciprocates that, whatever. So, anyways, that school ended up getting too small and shutting down. And so I went to one that was more of a Southern Baptist kind of vibe. So all the purity culture stuff and all the complementarianism kind of stuff. And I remember just the gender stuff just hitting me in the face. I didn't know what complementarianism was. I didn't really understand
Hmm.
the patriarchal ideas behind Christianity. And so I remember just thinking, why are all of my classmates talking about BDSM, like all of this submission stuff?
Yeah,
Like,
wait a minute. It's supposed to be a
so
Christian
as an
school here.
eighth grader, I'm like freaking out. Why are we talking about this? Finally understood what was actually going on. And I realized, huh, no, not doing that. I think I decided from a pretty young age that I am going to pick other women over this version of God. Something's going to be reconciling because I'm not doing this.
Not working for you.
Um, yeah, yeah. And so they got progressively more Christian nationalist. I'm a younger therapist. I'm 27. I'm Gen Z. When I was graduating high school, that's when the Republican primaries were happening and Donald Trump was first running and all of that kind of stuff. And so there were different teachers that had different things revealed to them. Somebody had decided that God told them that Ben Carson,
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Ben
That Ben
Carson.
Carson was going to be president and all of this stuff. And so just different things were being revealed to different people, and it was very chaotic. Gay marriage had just been legalized, and that was somehow a threat to everybody's marriage, which didn't really understand that unless your husband's secretly gay. This does not affect you. I'm so sorry, but it doesn't affect you. And I was still at a place theologically where I thought, okay, I've been taught that this is wrong. So, okay, it's wrong.
It must be wrong.
But, right, it must be wrong. I was still in that headspace. But I think I started to realize there's a difference between me personally believing that something's wrong and me believing that the government needs to restrict people from living their own lives in our pluralistic society. And so that's where I started first, was really from that political side of there's a difference between my own opinions and what other people are allowed to do. Other people are allowed to not be Christians. Other people are allowed to not be evangelicals. Other people are allowed to vote Democrat. That's
Ooh, that's
okay,
heresy for a
right?
Republican. If your parents are Trump people, MAGA
Yeah.
all the way. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I grew up in that type of Fox News
Yep.
family. Fox News was always on the in the background. Anytime we went on vacation, the hotel TV, we would turn it to Fox News before we left to get their viewership up as much as we can, and all that kind of stuff. And so, really, this idea that there's a difference between my values and what values other people are allowed to hold, and I think that's what eventually led me so far into acceptance and commitment therapy because it's all about values work, but we'll get to that later, I'm sure. And so, really, in college, trying to make that whole progressive Christian thing work and just realizing the culture around me and all the people that I knew growing up and all of the positive spiritual influences that I had were going that MAGA direction. And I think for me, January 6th, 2021 was really a turning point for me, turning
Yeah.
on the TV and watching. That is my subculture. Those are the people that taught me about Jesus Christ. That's the version of Jesus Christ that I was taught from the beginning was that version of Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And so not into that.
Not going to happen. Yeah, I remember
Yeah.
very vividly because I did a lot of episodes around that time, and I was just struck immediately by the Christian nationalism just infused the storming of the Capitol, combined with QAnon conspiracy theories, like you said. It was a
Yeah.
perfect storm that all came together in this MAGA cult sort of world. And I was just struck by the fact that, yeah, these people, most of them were somehow associated with not just Christianity, but a very charismatic, New Apostolic Reformation, Seven Mountains Mandate,
Yes.
Dominion theology, all that kind of stuff was going on. And I was like, okay, I really got into it because I'd been researching Dominion theology. So, yeah, it's really
Yeah.
striking. So that's the world you came out of, and you deconstructed, obviously, out of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is just how much the nationalism is baked into the theology from the beginning. I remember my first year in private school, I was writing Genesis 1:28 over and over until my hand cramped up because that was our verse of the year for the whole school. And at the time, I was like, okay, they just picked an easy verse for us. Why are we hyperfixating on this one verse? I am in 4th grade. I can learn more than one Bible verse. Like, how stupid do you think we are? But now I look back on that and it's, oh my gosh, there was the Christian nationalism, like right there from the beginning. They care about Genesis 1:28 more than pretty much any other verse. Let's just be real. So the Seven Mountain Mandate, we called them spheres of influence. So I don't know how much, or like different domains of influence.
Certainly
that one,
overlap,
I mean, that was very much a thing that we need to be the top of the top in all of these categories. We are going to take over society for Jesus. We're taking America back for Jesus, 100%. And that's really hard. And I think a big part of evangelicalism specifically is that there is actually a lot of flexibility with the doctrine. It's not like there's one belief that you have to deconstruct, right? There's Calvinism and there is
Arminianism,
whatever you want to call it, Arminianism,
tradition.
free will, whatever, whatever. So I think that really made my deconstruction journey a lot longer as I was like, okay, deconstructing both. And it's like, can we have a little bit of this and a little bit of this? And how much are these mutually exclusive, right? And that's been a big one also with the different end times theories. They kind of change what's more popular, kind of changes based on what's happening and what narrative we need to plug based on what's going on. And so that really made my deconstruction journey a lot more complicated as I felt like I needed to go down every single rabbit hole and disprove every single rabbit hole. And then I hit a point during COVID. Yeah, I hit a point during COVID. I think I was really trying to make evangelicalism work in a more human rights oriented way. And so I saw COVID originally when it was first like, oh, we get a couple weeks off. Oh, great. The beginning of COVID, I really saw it as a sign from God that now I can read the entire Bible cover to cover. I can really spend this extra time that I have been gifted from God with God, right? This is my opportunity.
Yeah, the ultimate quiet time.
And so then I did. Then I read the Bible cover to cover, and it wasn't my first time doing so.
Huge
but
mistake.
It was my first time doing so by myself without other influence. That was it. That was it for me.
Yep.
That was it.
Yeah. That's a classic story, isn't it? Penn and Teller. There's a classic story that basically reading the Bible made me an atheist. That's what he says. He would come to youth group every week and he would do what the youth pastor was telling him to do. Read your Bible. Okay, so he did. He went home and like, okay, we're going to read this section. Then he'd come back next week with a ton of questions. And finally, the youth pastor just said, look, you know what? Stop reading the Bible. You're asking too many questions here. This is becoming uncomfortable. I think you need to stop attending youth group as well. So reading the Bible made him an atheist. It can happen.
100%. And that's such a common experience, especially with people who are neurodivergent or neurospicy. That's the term that some people like nowadays. Is there's this neurodivergent urge to ask why. So those are the annoying, maybe come across as smart aleck kids in Sunday school. But when you keep asking why, there's a lot of theology that eventually falls apart. And all you have to do is try to figure it out.
Yeah, this is something I learned from Marlene Winnell. The idea when I read her book, Leaving the Fold, there was a lot of things that were really mind-blowing because she talks about it's about leaving fundamentalist religion and deconstructing and then reconstructing on the back end. And I realized, she said, that when you have those questions and doubts, and I had thousands of them growing up in fundamentalism and evangelicalism, I went to Bible college and seminary. I had a lot of those
Yeah.
moments where I did doubt, like you say. And she said, that is actually your authentic self trying to poke through the religious carapace, the religious shell. I call it, it's doubling. It's the idea of
Yeah.
Robert J. Lifton. We have this religious self, then there's our authentic self, which is suppressed. And she said, that's your authentic self going, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. It actually doesn't add up. And if I'd
Yeah.
only listened to that authentic self a little bit more, I realized that was my authentic self saying, dude, this doesn't add up.
Yeah. Yeah. And that authentic self gets labeled doubt, anxiety. I
Yeah.
think
Even
sometimes
sin.
even folks with OCD, it's hard to tell between that true self and then that OCD coming out. That's really hard. I also really like this idea of there's a cult identity and then there's the authentic identity, right? There's that mask, there's that persona, and then there's that real self. Because I think that model also gives us a lot of compassion for our family members who are still in it. I see a lot of people trying to ration and reason with their family members and think, oh, if I only phrased it this way, if I only remembered to bring up this, maybe that would change their mind. But the truth is no, because that information conflicts with their religious identity, cult identity, whatever you want to call it. And so their brain's not going to listen to that new information.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so facts don't really matter.
You suppress that. And I can resonate so much with your story because I'm thinking as you were describing going off to Christian school and everything, I did the same thing because I was raised and it was the opposite. It was a cessationist background. So we were taught that the gifts of the Spirit, tongues and miracles and all had ceased as of the first century. And anyone who was into charismatic theology was a heretic and all the rest of it. And I was
Okay.
raised in baptismal regeneration. It was the Church of Christ. So baptism equaled salvation. So I got baptized not once, not twice, but 3 times because I kept getting it wrong. So when I went to Bible college, though, I was, like you said, exposed to other theological traditions. That I see now is really where my deconstruction actually began. Even though I didn't realize it at the time, I was a committed Christian. But as you say, I was exposed to different views of the end times. I was exposed to charismatic theology. I was exposed to other traditions and told, wait a minute, they have merit, they have validity. You can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater. And I realized then that even at that stage, I guess I was certainly deconstructing the faith I'd been brought up in here at Bible college, ironically.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That would be hard to be in that environment. And I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
When they're already a pastor or they're already a missionary or they're already in that environment or at a Bible college. I have clients, that's their story that's when they started deconstructing. That's really isolating. That is super socially isolating to be the one who's having all of these wrong, bad thoughts and then just trying to keep up this image like you're okay.
Yeah.
Oof, that's so
Very
sad.
difficult. Yeah. And
Yeah.
I'm struggling. And then, like you said, I tried to make the progressive Christian thing work. I got into Rob Bell, Donald Miller, Father Richard Rohr.
Yeah.
I read all those, and
Yeah.
they were very helpful at where I was at the time because it, again,
Yeah.
expanded my horizons. I jettisoned a lot of my fundamentalist beliefs. And again, I didn't realize I was deconstructing, but I was. I tried to make it work for a long time until I couldn't. But it was a hugely necessary step, I think, in the journey to finally get out. It helped me to get out eventually. Does that kind of resonate with your journey into progressive Christianity?
Oh, 100%. Rachel Held Evans
Yep.
was a big one. Sarah Bessie was great. I'm trying to think of who else. Those were really the big ones for me.
Yeah, I read a
Because
lot of her stuff.
it started with that feminism piece, and so I think that's why.
Yeah, and I can remember talking to there's a friend of mine. She's in Australia, Dr. Josie McSkimming, and she said that was one of the things as a woman growing up in evangelicalism. She always had that nagging doubt: how come women can't be in charge? How come I'm smart? I've got a PhD. I should be doing teaching, preaching, whatever. Why can't I? And she could never reconcile. And that nagging doubt eventually came through. Did you ever go through that line as well? The whole, you said patriarchy. Did you struggle with that as a woman? You're being told you'll never be the pastor of a church. You probably won't be allowed to preach. Although in charismatic churches, they do have women preachers, though. That is a unique tradition. You've got the Paula White Canes of the world, Joyce Meyer, and people like that.
Yeah. So we got different problems going
Yeah,
on there. Yeah.
definitely. Some
Yeah.
issues there.
My actual church was Presbyterian and they were actually pretty chill. And there's a lot of good accountability. And there was a couple kind of odd off things that happened with pastors, but it was really cool to see the elders actually hold them accountable. And so I think overall that was a positive experience. When I was really little, I'm talking like 5 or 6, they left the PCUSA to join or eventually join the EPC over the issue of ordaining LGBTQ folks. And so that
Mm-hmm.
was just always a big one. I remember they tried to sue the PCUSA for their building because the PCUSA owned their building and then they lost and they had to buy their building back. And it was like there's this whole thing. So I think that kind of solidified the anti-gay stuff a little bit. But besides that, it was an overall really positive experience. And so I just remember thinking like, okay, I could always just be PCUSA. And those churches are so great, at least in our part of the country. I've had super positive experiences with them, super positive experiences with Episcopalians, same thing. And I think that's really wonderful. But I think sometimes those really conservative environments that are bringing out those issues of feminism and gay rights and all of that kind of stuff, those questions are still there even when you're in an environment that's affirming. Those questions that led to that deeper, okay, who is historical Jesus? And did this really happen? And evolution? And I don't know, fill in the blank with whatever your deconstruction topics were. I think there was still that thread of doubt that I still just wanted to pull on. So
Yeah, I think you make a really good point about that. Christianity is not a monolith, is it? There's so many traditions. So yeah, when you're deconstructing, you've got to work through whatever your particular. My background was completely the opposite of yours in terms of very fundamentalist, very cessationist, baptismal regeneration, and yet I still had tons of stuff to work through, as did you, from a different point of view. So ironic, isn't it? You mentioned too, you were talking about
yeah.
working with neurodivergent people. Is there an extra wrinkle there when you're helping someone who's deconstructing coming from that point of view?
Oh, 100%. I think there's a lot more stories with neurodivergence of being the problem child in Sunday school for asking too many questions. I touched on that earlier, that why, trying to figure it out. And so I see a lot of neurodivergence becoming really into apologetics and really into, I'm going to prove it,
Really drill
to
down
the
into this.
world and all that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it comes from the best of intentions, obviously. And then it turns into, hey, wait, they got a point there. Hey, wait, in the book of Numbers, God changes his mind. Hey, wait,
Wait a minute. Yeah,
the
God never
doctrine of the
changes. Yeah.
Trinity. How do we figure that one out? Because, yeah, the doctrine of the Trinity was a big one in Presbyterian circles. But I think just that why chasing the why. And then I do feel like most of the time, I would say the vast majority of the time, maybe not always, but the vast majority of the time, the thing that actually like flips a switch in your brain on the deconstruction journey is some sort of interpersonal trauma. Because we were taught if you follow the rules, if you stay true to this community, if you stay loyal to this community, we got your back. The whole world of all of the spiritual warfare stuff that's going on outside there because other people want human rights and all that crappy stuff that's happening, all that demonic stuff, we'll protect you from that. We'll keep you safe. We understand you. And so when there's interpersonal trauma that happens within that circle of trust, that can flip the switch and really make the cognitive dissonance a lot more uncomfortable. It's not that it wasn't there before, it just wasn't really problematic. And now there's this betrayal of somebody that was within the trusted circle. And so now the cognitive dissonance is a little bit more nagging at your brain. And now you want to go chase it and figure out what it is.
Mm-hmm. Talk about the cult psychology. Someone who gets kicked out for asking too many questions. They were actually trying to do the right thing. Someone chasing
Yeah.
that rabbit trail of apologetics. I
Huh.
did the same thing. I got into apologetics when I was a Christian. I really wanted to find answers to every possible question. I used to listen to the Bible Answer Man radio show religiously on the radio every day. I was a delivery driver in Seattle. I listened to Christian radio all day in my truck. And I was like
Yeah.
going to Bible college. I thought every day for free I could listen to the great radio preachers and all these great things, learn so much, really get into it.
Right.
But then I'm going to the pastor asking questions and like, wait a minute, you're pushing too far here. And then if you get kicked out for being a troublemaker, then you've got to deconstruct from the trauma of that as well.
Yeah, 100%. And if all truth is God's truth, then what are we doing wrong by
Yeah.
trying to get more of it?
What
Right.
are we so afraid of?
Um,
What about the
Exactly.
we mentioned the Christian nationalist piece. What are you seeing right now? Because I've been doing stuff on Pete Hegseth, Doug Wilson. There's the connection there. A lot of people are now becoming aware. They're saying, "Wait a minute, who's this guy, Doug Wilson? He's preaching at the Pentagon." Then they're realizing Pete Hegseth's a member of his denomination, the CREC. He's praying these prayers at the Pentagon. He's preaching. He's got guys coming in. I think people are becoming traumatized just generally. They're not even Christians. They're experiencing religious trauma syndrome, seeing a guy like Pete Hegseth or Doug Wilson. Are you coming across any of that in your work?
Oh yeah, 100%. Just that frustration of we are stuck in this society. I definitely have a lot of clients that are ex-Christian and don't want to do the deconstruction work. They already figured that out. They're okay. They just really that I have these values and I'm actually saying the quiet part out loud. And so I see a lot of that as well. From a psychological standpoint, there's a lot of just feeling trapped. And there's a lot of feeling like, okay, do I stay and fight? Or do I go move to New Zealand or Switzerland or someplace
Yeah.
where I personally am going to be better off? There's also this nagging question of what does it look like to be a good citizen and to be patriotic without being nationalistic,
Mm-hmm.
right? I feel like there's this group in America that just kind of dominating all of the American flag merch and all that kind of stuff, and it's really sad. And so I hear these arguments from the MAGA side, these arguments from the MAGA side of, oh, look, we're just being patriotic. And I think it's really sad for people outside of MAGA that it's like you see this symbol that maybe as a child meant freedom and safety and all of these things. And now anytime you see it, what do you assume about the person who put that piece of decor outside their house or whatever it is? So there's a lot of that. I think there's a lot of just people being more aware of Christian privilege.
Yeah, Christian.
Right? There's white privilege. We know about white privilege. We know about male privilege. And MAGA folks have problems with that, whatever. Christian privilege is real. I think evangelical Christianity is seen as the default and everybody else is an outsider. And I think that's something that I've realized for a long time. Growing up, First Amendment rights used to apply to everybody. Everybody had the freedom of assembly. Everybody had the freedom to practice whatever religion they wanted as long as you're not infringing on other people's rights. And over time within that community, it has shifted to First Amendment rights apply to any Christian religion you want to be, because we're all on the same side. We're all voting for the same causes. Even if I think you're going to hell because you don't believe in the Trinity, we're still fighting for the same cause, the same values. And so really just seeing that shift, it's subtle, but it's really important.
It's become weaponized, isn't it? Because I remember as a kid, I talk about this in my book, in 1979, I was 13 years old. I got baptized for the second time then. And my pastor at the time in Seattle, he was a big fan of Jerry Falwell Sr. And this was the started. But we had such a focus on evangelism. We were going to win America for Christ one person at a time through evangelism. Yeah. Now, though, as you say, it's been weaponized. Literally, we're going to make the laws whereby you have to submit. So we're going to take away a woman's right to abortion. The next thing on the chopping block is LGBTQ plus rights. This is what they're working on now. They're making it more draconian, more Gilead, more Handmaid's Tale. And I think this is very scary. I've been in the UK for going on 21 years. I think, like you say, it was very helpful for my mental health to literally escape. I didn't know I was doing it at the time, but I'm very glad that I'm a British citizen. I'm never going back because I don't think I could live in Trump's America. I don't know what I would do if I was living there now.
Yeah, it's a rough decision because we love our families. We still want to be around our families, but I spend more time than I would care to admit daydreaming about New Zealand. My daytime would be Kansas nighttime. I could offer evening telehealth appointments. I have all the spreadsheets. I have all the Pinterest boards, and it's hard not to think about. And so there's that weird, I don't know, that weird values conflict there, right? If I got to take care of myself, but also my family's here. I love my family. It's complicated and it's a hard decision. And so I don't think, but no judgment either way, regardless of what folks do. You got to make the best decision for you.
I know you have to go really soon. I just have a couple of really quick questions. I always ask people this. What are some of the most helpful strategies you found to help people reconstruct? Because that's an important piece. It's one thing to deconstruct. Yes, we need to do that hard work. But then you've got to rebuild. You've got to build it back up. What are some of the most helpful tools that you can kind of maybe quickly go through? I know you've only got a few minutes left, but give some
Yeah,
hope to the
yeah,
listeners.
of course. So the biggest thing is values work from acceptance and commitment therapy. I've chosen ACT specifically as my main modality as a therapist, really because I think it helps people in that rebuilding stage. You get to decide what you value now. You get to decide who you are, how you spend your time. And so really trying to take committed action in the direction of your values, whether it's particular relationships or values can be really those abstract nouns, altruism, security, safety, even fun and creativity, things like that. What really makes you? Because your religious beliefs aren't really your identity anymore. A lot of us were taught to find our whole identity in Christ. And I remember I was even told at the second Christian school that I went to that our identity should be so rooted in Christ that people don't really know who we are outside of Jesus Christ. And so that's not
Wow.
really a
Not
philosophy that
helpful.
allows us to be a diverse body of Christ with different interests and different experiences. And so that doesn't really even line up with even those biblical values if you want to follow those biblical values. But really, what values led you out the door, right? Whether it's that kindness or whatever. How can you take committed action in the direction of those values? And maybe it just takes on a different form of volunteering or starting a little side hustle or whatever it is. So that would be the biggest one. And I would say another one is just nervous system awareness and regulation. What are your triggers? I think sometimes, since there are so many Christian things just embedded into our everyday life, there's triggers that come up that we don't even realize. Like, we don't even realize that language was used in that way back when we were in that abusive environment. And so just recognizing those triggers and just seeing what it does for your nervous system, just increasing that awareness.
Yeah, that's a good point. I was going to ask you about triggers because that's a huge topic. We could talk probably a whole episode on that.
Yeah.
I've been triggered before. I didn't know what was
Yeah.
going on at the time, but I've since
Yeah.
learned. This is something I learned from Tia Leving. She said triggers are information. Your body's trying to tell you something, and rather than being debilitated by it, you need to go, okay, why am I being triggered at this particular moment precisely for
Yes.
what's going on here? I need to drill down into this and figure out. Another piece I was thinking too is the education piece. This was a hugely helpful thing for me, reading books on cult psychology and leaving the fold, books like that. I was able then to name what was done to me, and that then was disempowered the effect that it had on me. So I know that's another helpful piece, isn't it? I know you got to
Oh,
go. I was going
yes.
to ask you too really quick, how can people get a hold of you if they want to find out more information, if they want to contact you for therapy or counseling? What's the best way?
Yeah, so the best way to find all of my resources is morganpiercy.com. And then for my private practice specifically is deconstructionkc.com. I just have all sorts of resources and blog posts and all sorts of stuff in there.
Okay, that's so good. I know you've actually got a client coming up, so I don't want to keep you too long, but I would love to have you come back if you're interested. We do these monthly Dismantling Doctrine podcast Zoom calls, so I'll hit you up. You can come back as a guest and meet people and talk for
Yes.
about an hour or so. I'll give you some dates and maybe we can work something out. But thank you so much, Morgan. Really enjoyed meeting you. Great chatting with you. We'll definitely connect up again.
Okay, yes, that sounds good. Thank you so much, Clint. Have a great rest of your day.
Yeah, you too. Okay, see you later.